Dr. Kelvin stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Science Station, his three eyes focused on the data streams flowing across the holographic display. The station orbited a neutral moon between 7 different star systems, a place where scientists from across the galaxy gathered to share knowledge and conduct research. For 200 years, Kelvin had studied biology, specializing in the genetic structures of newly discovered species. In all that time, nothing had disturbed him quite like what he was looking at now. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago. They were a young species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel. Their planet, Earth, was a chaotic world of diverse climates and deadly predators. Most species in the galaxy evolved on gentler worlds, places where cooperation was necessary for survival. Earth was different. Earth was brutal. "The scans must be wrong," Kelvin muttered, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. He turned to his assistant, a small being named Prella, who belonged to a species known for their precision and attention to detail. Prella's antennae twitched nervously. "I have run the scans 17 times, Doctor. The results are consistent. Human DNA contains sequences we have never encountered in any other sentient species." Kelvin moved closer to the display, his scaled fingers tracing the double helix structure that represented human genetic code. Embedded within the chromosomes were patterns that made his blood run cold. They looked like instructions, like blueprints for something that should not exist in a species that claimed to be peaceful. "Have you contacted the other xenobiologists?" Kelvin asked. "Yes, Doctor. They are arriving within the hour. I thought it best to wait until we had a full panel before making any formal reports to the Council." Kelvin nodded. That was wise. If his suspicions were correct, this discovery would shake the foundations of galactic society. The Council had strict laws about military enhancement, about creating weapons out of living beings. Wars had been fought over such things in the distant past. The galaxy had learned its lessons in blood. The humans seemed nice enough. Their diplomats were friendly, perhaps a bit too eager to please. They brought gifts of art and music, samples of their culture that many species found fascinating. They spoke of peace and cooperation, of learning from more advanced civilizations. They seemed harmless, but their DNA told a different story. Within the hour, the observation deck was crowded with scientists from a dozen different species. There were the tall, willowy Xenathi with their crystalline skin, the stocky Borund who communicated through color changes in their fur, the gaseous Whispers who floated in containment suits. All of them were experts in biology, genetics, and evolutionary science. Kelvin presented his findings to stunned silence. "As you can see," he explained, pointing to highlighted sections of the human genome, "these sequences are unlike anything we have cataloged. They appear to be dormant, inactive for the most part. But the structure is clear. These are enhancement protocols." A Xenathi scientist named Crystalia spoke up, her voice like wind chimes. "Enhancement protocols? You mean like the forbidden modifications?" "Worse," Kelvin said quietly. "The forbidden modifications were crude attempts to improve soldiers through genetic manipulation. They were created artificially by ancient species who destroyed themselves with their own weapons. What I am showing you appears to be natural. It evolved within humans over millions of years." The room erupted in confused chatter. A Barund named Thornek, his fur flashing angry reds and oranges, demanded to know how such a thing was possible. Evolution did not create soldiers. Evolution created survivors, yes, but not weapons. Kelvin displayed another set of data. "Look at Earth's history. The humans have been cataloging their own evolution, studying their fossil records. Their planet has experienced 5 major extinction events. Each time life was nearly wiped out. Each time the survivors had to be tougher, faster, more adaptable than before. The humans descended from predators who hunted other predators. They competed with creatures that could tear them apart with ease." Prella added her own findings. "I have studied human history extensively. They have been at war with each other for their entire recorded civilization. Not occasional conflicts like most species experience, but constant warfare. Thousands of years of fighting, adapting, improving their tactics and strategies. Their entire society has been shaped by conflict. And yet they come to us speaking of peace, Crystalia said skeptically. Perhaps they mean it, Kelvin replied. Perhaps they have finally evolved beyond their violent nature. But the genetic potential remains. It is written in every cell of their bodies. A whisper scientist named Drifter, his voice emanating from speakers on his containment suit, asked the question everyone was thinking. What exactly do these genetic sequences do? Kelvin pulled up a detailed analysis. Based on our models, these dormant sequences could trigger multiple enhancements: increased muscle density and strength, accelerated healing, enhanced reflexes and reaction times, improved oxygen utilization and endurance, and most disturbing of all, increased aggression and reduced fear response when under threat. A natural supersoldier formula, Thornek said, his fur now a pale, frightened blue. Precisely, Kelvin confirmed. The humans do not seem to know it exists, or at least they have not acknowledged it publicly. But it is there, waiting. Under the right conditions, these sequences could activate. What conditions? Crystalia asked. Kelvin manipulated the display, showing chemical and hormonal data. Extreme stress, severe physical trauma, prolonged exposure to combat situations. The human body appears designed to adapt to warfare. The more they fight, the more these enhancements express themselves. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy had been at peace for 3,000 years. The Council maintained that peace through diplomacy, trade, and mutual cooperation. There were no wars because there was no need for war. Species shared resources and settled disputes through negotiation. But humans had evolved in war. They carried the genetic legacy of countless battles in their very cells. We must inform the Council, Crystalia said, immediately. And tell them what? Drifter challenged. That a new species has dangerous DNA? They have done nothing wrong. They have broken no laws. Should we exile them for the crime of their evolution? We should monitor them, Thornek suggested. Study them closely. Make sure these sequences remain dormant. Kelvin agreed that was prudent, but he had concerns. The problem is that we do not fully understand the activation triggers. My models suggest that even normal human activities might cause partial activation. Their athletes, for example, their soldiers, even their laborers who perform physical work, they all show elevated expression of these genetic sequences compared to their baseline population. Prella brought up additional data. I have been analyzing human entertainment media. Their stories, their games, their simulations, they are filled with violence and conflict. They seem to celebrate warriors and soldiers. They have entire genres dedicated to warfare. Cultural remnants of their violent past, Crystalia suggested hopefully. Or preparation for their violent future, Thornek countered darkly. Kelvin made a decision. We will prepare a comprehensive report for the Council, but we will be measured in our language. We will present facts, not fears. The humans deserve a fair assessment. However, I propose that we conduct additional research. With the Council's permission, we should study human volunteers, observe them in various conditions, understand exactly what we are dealing with. The other scientists agreed, though none of them looked happy about it. They were researchers, not soldiers or politicians. They dealt in knowledge, not security threats. But this discovery had thrust them into a position they never wanted to occupy. As the meeting dispersed, Kelvin remained at the display, studying the human genome. It was elegant in its complexity, beautiful even. Nature had crafted something remarkable on that distant blue world. But nature did not care about peace or morality. Nature only cared about survival. And humans, it seemed, were very good at surviving. 2 days later, Kelvin received approval from the Galactic Council to proceed with his research. The council took his report seriously, but urged caution and discretion. They did not want to cause panic or create diplomatic incidents. The humans were to be treated with respect and courtesy. The research was to be framed as a standard xenobiological survey, nothing more. 3 human volunteers were recruited from the diplomatic corps on the station. They were told that scientists wanted to learn more about human biology to better serve their species' medical needs. It was not entirely a lie, but it was not the full truth either. The first volunteer was a woman named Sarah Chen, a linguist who worked in the translation department. She was 32 years old, average height and build for a human, with dark hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She seemed genuinely excited to help with the research. The second volunteer was a man named James O'Brien, a security officer assigned to protect human diplomats. He was larger than Sarah, heavily muscled from what humans called working out, a deliberate process of stressing their bodies to build strength. He had scars on his arms and a serious demeanor. The third volunteer was a younger man named David Park, an engineer who maintained human equipment on the station. He was slim and energetic, constantly asking questions about the research process. Kelvin and his team began with basic tests, strength measurements, endurance trials, reaction time assessments, all standard procedures for understanding a species' physical capabilities. The results were concerning even before any stress was applied. Compared to most spacefaring species, humans were remarkably strong and fast. Sarah, the smallest volunteer, could lift weights that would strain a Borand warrior. James could move with a speed that seemed impossible for a being his size. David's hand-eye coordination exceeded that of species who had evolved specifically for precision work. "This is their baseline?" Prella asked, reviewing the data with disbelief. "This is their baseline," Kelvin confirmed. "Remember, they evolved on a high-gravity world with dangerous predators. What seems exceptional to us is normal for them." But the real tests were yet to come. Kelvin needed to understand what happened when humans were pushed, when their bodies faced stress and danger. He designed scenarios carefully, using virtual reality simulations that would create psychological pressure without actual risk. The ethics board had approved them after careful review. Sarah went first. She was placed in a simulation where she had to navigate a collapsing building to rescue trapped individuals. The scenario was intense, but not overtly violent. Kelvin and his team monitored her genetic markers in real time, watching for activation of the dormant sequences. Within minutes of starting the simulation, they saw changes. Sarah's adrenaline spiked as expected, but something else happened. Specific genetic markers began expressing themselves, markers that had been dormant during the baseline tests. Her muscle tissue began operating more efficiently. Her reaction times improved. Her brain activity showed enhanced pattern recognition and decision-making under pressure. "She is adapting," Kelvin whispered, watching the data in real time. "Her body is responding to the stress by activating enhancement sequences." Sarah completed the simulation successfully, saving all the virtual victims. When she emerged from the VR pod, she was breathing hard but smiling. "That was intense," she said. "Good training, though. We run disaster scenarios like that back on Earth sometimes." Kelvin nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. Of course they did. Of course humans train for disasters and emergencies. They had evolved to handle such things. James's simulation was more challenging. He was placed in a combat scenario where he had to defend a position against hostile forces. It was more violent, more direct. The ethics board had debated this test extensively, but Kelvin argued that understanding human responses to combat situations was essential given their history. James's genetic response was dramatic. Within seconds of the combat simulation beginning, his enhancement sequences activated far beyond what Sarah had shown. His strength increased noticeably. His movements became fluid and precise. His tactical thinking was extraordinary, adapting to changing threats with ease. Most remarkable was his emotional state. Despite the intense violence of the simulation, his fear response was minimal. He was focused, calm, efficient. When he finished, James seemed energized rather than exhausted. "Not bad," he said. "The enemy AI was pretty smart, better than some training programs we have back home." Training programs. They train for combat. Even now, in peacetime, humans prepared for war. David's simulation was different. He was given a complex engineering crisis, multiple systems failing simultaneously while lives hung in the balance. It was not violent, but it was intensely stressful. His genetic markers activated too, though in different patterns than Sarah or James. His mind seemed to accelerate, processing multiple problems simultaneously with enhanced focus and creativity. After the simulations, Kelvin and his team spent days analyzing the results. The patterns were clear and terrifying. Humans possessed an adaptive genetic system that responded to stress by enhancing their capabilities. It was not a simple on-off switch, but a complex, graduated response. The more pressure they faced, the more their bodies activated dormant potential. "It is like they are designed for crisis," Prella observed. "Their evolution has created a species that becomes more capable when things become more dangerous." "That is exactly what happened," Kelvin agreed. "On Earth, during times of plenty, humans could afford to be their baseline selves. But when resources became scarce, when predators threatened, when disasters struck, their bodies would shift into enhanced states. Those who could adapt survived. Those who could not died. Over millions of years, this created a species with extraordinary adaptive potential." Crystalia, who had been observing the research, raised a critical question. "But what happens if that potential is fully unleashed? What if humans face a threat so great that their genetic sequences activate completely?" Kelvin did not have an answer. His models could only extrapolate so far, but the possibilities were disturbing. A fully enhanced human might be capable of feats that seemed impossible. Strength rivaling the Borund, speed matching the Zenithie, endurance beyond the Krell, intelligence comparable to the Whispers, all in one being. "They would be unstoppable," Thorneck said quietly. He had been reviewing the data independently, coming to the same conclusions. A human operating at full genetic potential would be a perfect warrior, a super soldier by design. The team sat in uncomfortable silence, contemplating the implications. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. Even the ancient species who had created the forbidden modifications had only achieved pale imitations of what nature had crafted in humanity. And there were billions of humans on Earth, all carrying this potential in their cells. Kelvin thought about the human volunteers, about their friendliness and curiosity. Sarah had brought him Earth tea as a thank you gift. James had shared stories about his family. David had spent hours enthusiastically discussing engineering principles. They seemed so normal, so peaceful, but they were not normal. They were the genetic descendants of apex predators, survivors of countless catastrophes, inheritors of a legacy written in adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. They were, whether they knew it or not, potential super soldiers. The question that haunted Kelvin as he prepared his report for the Council was simple but profound. Should the galaxy fear humanity, or should it hope that humanity never learns what it truly is? The Galactic Council chambers were ancient, built by species long extinct, maintained as a symbol of continuity and shared governance. The Great Hall could accommodate representatives from 200 different worlds, each with their own environmental requirements. Atmospheric barriers and gravity adjusters created pockets of customized space, allowing methane breathers to sit beside oxygen breathers, high-gravity species to coexist with low-gravity species. Kelvin stood at the speaker's podium, his report transmitted to every representative's personal display. He had spent weeks preparing this presentation, carefully wording each section to be informative without being alarmist. But he could feel the tension in the chamber as he delivered his findings. The human representatives sat in their designated section, apparently unaware of the specific nature of the research being discussed. The council had decided not to inform them directly until the presentation was complete. It seemed unfair, but the council leaders worried about human reactions to learning about their own genetic potential. Kelvin explained the discovery, showing genomic data in simulation results. He presented the facts cleanly, avoiding speculation, but the implications were clear enough. Every representative in the chamber understood what they were looking at. When he finished, the chamber erupted in debate. Some species called for immediate restrictions on human expansion into the galaxy. Others argued for enhanced monitoring programs. A few suggested that the humans should be quarantined to their own system until more was understood. The human representative, a diplomat named Ambassador Lu, requested permission to speak. She was an older woman, gray hair pulled back in a simple style, wearing the blue and white uniform of Earth's United Diplomatic Corps. Her face showed confusion and growing concern as she addressed the council. "I want to make sure I understand this correctly," Ambassador Lu said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "You are saying that humans possess genetic sequences that could make us into super soldiers? That our DNA contains natural enhancement protocols?" "That is correct," Kelvin confirmed from his podium. "And you discovered this how?" "Through standard xenobiological surveys. We conduct such research on all member species to better understand medical needs and physiological requirements." Ambassador Lu was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "I need to consult with Earth. This is not information we had. Our own geneticists have mapped the human genome extensively, but we may have missed the significance of what they found. Or perhaps we saw it, but did not understand it in the same context." A Zenithite counselor, one of the more hawkish voices, spoke up. "Whether humans were aware or not is irrelevant. The potential exists. The threat exists. We must take action to protect the galaxy." "Threat?" Ambassador Lu's voice sharpened. "We have done nothing threatening. We have followed every council law and regulation. We have been nothing but cooperative." "Now," the Zenithite said, "but what happens when your species faces its first real crisis in space? What happens when you feel threatened? Dr. Kelvin's research suggests your genetic enhancements activate in response to stress and danger. The more threatened you feel, the more dangerous you become." Ambassador Lu looked at Kelvin. "Is that accurate?" Kelvin felt the weight of multiple eyes upon him, human and alien alike. He chose his words carefully. "The research suggests that human genetic enhancements are adaptive, expressed in greater degrees under increased stress. However, I want to be clear, this is a natural evolutionary trait, not a designed weapon system. Many species have adaptive responses to stress. The human version is simply more pronounced." "More pronounced," a Boran counselor repeated. "Doctor, your report suggests that a fully enhanced human could rival the greatest warriors of any species in the galaxy. That is not simply more pronounced. That is unprecedented." The debate continued for hours. Various proposals were put forward, each one met with arguments for and against. Some species wanted to restrict human access to certain technologies, fearing what they might do with advanced weapons. Others wanted to limit human population growth, worried about billions of potential super soldiers. A few extreme voices even suggested finding a way to genetically modify humans, to remove or suppress the enhancement sequences. That last suggestion brought Ambassador Lu to her feet in anger. "You will not modify our species. We are sovereign beings with the right to our own genetic integrity. If you attempt such a thing, it will be an act of war." War. The word hung in the chamber like a physical presence. The galaxy had not seen war in 3,000 years. The very concept seemed alien to most species present, but humans had lived with war for their entire existence. They understood it in ways others did not. A whisper counselor, floating in his containment suit, tried to calm the situation. No one is suggesting force modification, Ambassador. We are simply exploring options. Surely you understand the Council's concern. If your genetic potential is as significant as Dr. Kelvin suggests, it represents a destabilizing force in galactic society. Ambassador Liu took a breath, regaining her composure. I understand the concern, I truly do. But I ask the Council to consider this from humanity's perspective. We did not choose our evolution. We did not design ourselves to be this way. We are the product of our world and its challenges. Should we be punished for that? It was a fair question, one that made many counselors uncomfortable. The galaxy prided itself on enlightenment, on moving beyond prejudice and fear. But this situation challenged those principles. The Council leader, an ancient being called the Eternal Voice, spoke for the first time. The Eternal Voice was not a single entity, but a collective consciousness of the Council's founding species, digitized minds linked together for millennia. When it spoke, all listened. The Council recognizes Ambassador Liu's point, the Eternal Voice said, its words resonating through every translation device. Humanity has committed no crime. You have been exemplary members of the galactic community. However, we cannot ignore the implications of this discovery. We propose a compromise. The chamber fell silent, waiting. Humanity will be allowed full rights and privileges as council members, with no restrictions on your expansion or development. However, we ask for transparency. Share your genetic research with the Council's scientific community. Allow continued monitoring of your population. And most importantly, work with us to understand what your species truly is. If there comes a time when your genetic potential fully manifests, we need to understand what that means for all of us. Ambassador Liu considered this carefully. You want us to help you study ourselves? To cooperate in research that makes some of you fear us? We want to build trust, the Eternal Voice replied. Fear comes from ignorance. Knowledge breeds understanding. If humans and aliens work together to understand human potential, perhaps we can find ways to coexist peacefully, regardless of what that potential might be. It was a reasonable proposal, more reasonable than Liu had expected given the tone of the debate. She nodded slowly. I will need to consult with Earth's government, but I believe this is something we can agree to. We have nothing to hide. We did not even know about these genetic sequences ourselves, at least not in the context you have presented. We are as interested in understanding them as you are. The Council voted, and the compromise passed with a large majority. Humanity would remain a full Council member, but with enhanced cooperation on genetic research. It was not a perfect solution, but it was workable. As the Council session ended and representatives filed out of the chambers, Kelvin found himself approached by Ambassador Liu. She looked tired, the stress of the session evident in her face. Dr. Kelvin, she said, I want to thank you for your thoroughness and your measured presentation. I know some of my colleagues on Earth might see this as an intrusion, but I think you may have done us a service. Kelvin was surprised. A service? How so? You have shown us something about ourselves that we did not fully understand. Yes, human scientists have mapped our genome, but we looked at it from the inside, seeing ourselves as we are. You looked at us from the outside, seeing us as we might be. That perspective is valuable, even if it is uncomfortable. You are not angry about the research we conducted on your volunteers? Ambassador Liu smiled slightly. The volunteers agreed to standard medical testing. From what I understand, that is what you provided. The simulations were well within normal stress testing parameters. No one was harmed. No, doctor, I am not angry. Concerned, yes. Worried about how this will affect human-alien relations, absolutely. But angry? No. She paused, then asked, Do you fear us, Dr. Kelvin? Honestly? Kelvin considered the question carefully. I fear what I do not understand. Your species represents something new in the galaxy, something unprecedented. That generates concern. But do I fear you, Sarah, James, and David, the humans I have come to know through my research? No. They are people, individuals with hopes and dreams like any sentient being. I do not fear them. But you fear humanity as a whole? I respect humanity's potential, Kelvin said carefully. There is a difference between fear and respect. A wise being respects a dangerous thing without necessarily fearing it. Ambassador Liu nodded, accepting the distinction. Fair enough. I suppose that is the best we can hope for right now. Respect is a good place to start. As she walked away, Kelvin wondered if he had been entirely honest. Did he fear humanity? Perhaps not in the immediate sense, but when he thought about the long-term implications, about what might happen if humans ever truly needed to unleash their genetic potential, a cold uncertainty settled in his chest. The galaxy was about to become much more interesting and perhaps much more dangerous. In the weeks following the council session, Kelvin's research expanded significantly. With the cooperation of Earth's government, he gained access to human genetic databases containing information from millions of individuals. The data confirmed his initial findings, but also revealed additional complexities. The enhancement sequences were not uniform across all humans. Different populations showed different expressions, variations that had developed in response to their specific environments on Earth. Humans from high-altitude regions showed stronger oxygen utilization markers. Populations from colder climates had enhanced metabolic efficiency. Those from regions with endemic diseases displayed more robust immune responses. It is like they specialized, Prella observed, reviewing the population data. Different human groups evolved different enhancement patterns based on their challenges. But the core sequences are present in all of them, Kelvin noted. The baseline potential exists in every human, regardless of their ancestral background. The variations are simply adaptations on top of that foundation. More human volunteers joined the research program, eager to understand their own genetic potential. Some were scientists fascinated by the discovery. Others were military personnel, interested in the combat applications. A few were ordinary citizens, curious about what made them human. One volunteer particularly interested Kelvin was a woman named Dr. Rebecca Sato, a human geneticist who specialized in evolutionary biology. She brought her own research to the project, years of work that suddenly made sense in a new context. We always knew humans were unusually adaptable, Dr. Sato explained during one of their discussions. We spread across every continent on Earth, surviving in deserts, tundras, jungles, mountains, everywhere. We adapted to environments that should have killed us, but we thought it was just cultural adaptation, technology, and knowledge. We did not realize it was also genetic. Your species is remarkable at multiple levels, Kelvin said. Cultural, technological, and biological adaptation all working together. It is quite elegant. Dr. Sato smiled. Elegant? Most of the galaxy seems to think it is terrifying. It can be both, Kelvin replied. Nature's most elegant solutions are often its most dangerous. Through Dr. Sato, Kelvin learned more about human history, about the countless challenges their species had overcome. Wars, yes, but also plagues that killed millions, natural disasters that devastated entire regions, climate changes that forced massive migrations. Humanity had survived everything their world threw at them. We are survivors, Dr. Sato said. That is what our DNA says. We survive because we adapt, because we push through, because we refuse to give up. Is that really so threatening? In a galaxy at peace, yes, Kelvin admitted, because it suggests you were made for conflict, shaped by it, defined by it. Most species evolve toward cooperation and stability. You evolve toward survival at any cost. Dr. Sato was quiet for a moment, then said, but we chose peace anyway. Despite our nature, despite our history, despite our genetic programming, we chose to reach for the stars in friendship. Doesn't that count for something? It did count for something. Kelvin had to admit that. The humans had achieved world peace only 50 years before developing FTL travel. They had overcome their violent past through conscious choice and effort. That took remarkable willpower. Perhaps that was the most impressive thing about humans. Not their genetic potential, but their ability to choose something other than what their nature suggested. The research continued for months, then a full year. Kelvin published regular updates, and slowly, the galaxy's fear began to ease. Humans remained friendly, cooperative, unthreatening. The feared supersoldiers did not materialize. Life went on. But then came the Rift crisis. A spatial anomaly appeared at the edge of Council space, a tear in reality itself. From it emerged beings unlike anything the galaxy had encountered. Vast, powerful entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They were not hostile in the traditional sense. They simply consumed matter and energy to grow, expanding through the galaxy like a cancer. The Council tried diplomacy first, as always. The entities did not respond to communication attempts. They simply spread, consuming stations and ships, converting matter into more of themselves. The Council tried defensive measures next. Energy shields, weapons, everything in their arsenal. Nothing worked. The entities adapted to every attack, evolved countermeasures within hours. Species that had lived in peace for millennia suddenly faced extinction. Kelvin watched the crisis unfold from his station, horror growing as system after system fell to the Rift entities. The Council fleet was retreating, unable to slow the advance. Within weeks, a dozen populated worlds had been evacuated. Within months, the entities would reach the core systems. The galaxy was losing its first real war in 3,000 years, and it had no idea how to fight back. Then the humans volunteered. Ambassador Liu addressed an emergency council session. "We have military experience that most species lack. Let us help. Let us fight." The council was reluctant. Unleashing humanity's genetic potential seemed dangerous, even in the face of extinction. But desperation overcame caution. The council agreed. Earth mobilized. Within days, human military forces began arriving in the conflict zone. Soldiers, ships, weapons systems designed for real warfare rather than ceremonial defense. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Kelvin requested permission to observe human forces in action, to document how their genetic enhancements manifested under real combat conditions. Permission was granted, and he found himself aboard a human warship called the Defiant, heading toward the front lines. The ship's captain was a weathered woman named Commander Elizabeth Torres. She welcomed Kelvin aboard with professional courtesy, but made it clear that he would stay out of the way once fighting began. "No offense, Doctor," Torres said, "but you are not equipped for combat. Stay in the observation deck, and our AI will show you what you need to see." Kelvin agreed readily. He had no desire to be in actual danger. When the Defiant reached the conflict zone, Kelvin saw the Rift entities for the first time. They were massive, shimmering creatures of impossible geometry, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They moved through space like fish through water, consuming everything in their path. The Defiant and a dozen other human ships moved to intercept. "All hands battle stations," Torres announced over the ship's communication system. "Remember your training, stay focused, watch your sectors. We are going to show these things what happens when you threaten humanity." Through the observation deck's displays, Kelvin watched the battle unfold. The human ships moved with precision and coordination, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for most species. They attacked from multiple angles, using weapons that seemed deliberately designed to cause maximum damage. But what struck Kelvin most was watching the humans themselves. Through internal cameras, he could see crew members at their stations, working under extreme stress, and he could see in real time through biosensor data their genetic markers activating. Every human on the ship was enhancing. Their bodies were responding to the combat situation by unlocking potential that had been dormant. Reflexes sharpened, strength increased, mental processing accelerated. They were becoming more than they had been, transforming in response to the threat. A rift entity attacked the Defiant directly, its impossible form wrapping around the ship's hull. Alarms blared as the hull began to fail, matter being converted and consumed. Torres remained calm. Helm, emergency rotation. Weapons, fire everything into the contact points. Engineering, maximize power to aft shields. The crew responded instantly, their enhanced capabilities allowing them to work faster and more efficiently than should have been possible. The ship spun, throwing off the entity. Weapons fired in synchronized patterns, exploiting weaknesses that human tactical AIs had identified. The entity recoiled, damaged. Again, Torres ordered, press the advantage, show it we are not prey. The battle continued for hours. Human ships danced through space, fighting with a ferocity and skill that shocked Kelvin. They lost ships, yes, humans died, but they kept fighting, adapting their tactics, learning from each engagement. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The Rift entities, which had adapted to every weapon the galaxy threw at them, could not adapt fast enough to human warfare. Because human warfare was not about superior technology or overwhelming force. It was about determination, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice for victory. Kelvin watched in awe as Commander Torres coordinated her fleet, making split-second decisions that meant life or death for thousands. Her genetic enhancements were fully activated now, her mind operating at levels that would have seemed superhuman before the battle. But she was not unique. Every human in the fleet was experiencing the same transformation. They were becoming the super soldiers Kelvin had feared, right before his eyes. But they were not monsters. They were people fighting to protect their new home in the galaxy, to save species they had only known for 5 years. They were heroes. After 12 hours of continuous combat, the human fleet forced the Rift entities into retreat. It was the first time the entities had been pushed back, the first victory in a war the galaxy had been losing. When the battle ended, Kelvin found Commander Torres on the bridge, exhausted but unbroken. Her genetic markers were still elevated, her body still in an enhanced state, but she seemed human, utterly and completely human. "We held the line," Torres said, more to herself than anyone else. "We actually held the line." "You did more than that," Kelvin said quietly. "You showed the galaxy how to fight. You showed us what humans can do." Torres looked at him, and Kelvin saw tears in her eyes. "We lost 43 people today, Doctor. 43 humans died holding this position. That is what we can do. We can die for others. That is what we have always done." In that moment, Kelvin understood something profound. Yes, humans carried super soldier potential in their DNA. Yes, they could become warriors of terrible capability when needed. But they also carried something else in their genetic legacy: the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, to stand between danger and those who needed protection, to choose to be heroes rather than conquerors. The war against the Rift entities continued for another 3 months. Human forces led the charge, teaching other species their tactics, showing them how to fight with determination rather than just technology. Slowly, system by system, the entities were pushed back toward the rift they had emerged from. Kelvin documented it all, recording the transformation of humanity from peaceful newcomers to the galaxy's defenders. He watched humans work alongside aliens, protecting species they barely knew. He saw their genetic enhancements in action, saw them become the super soldiers evolution had designed them to be. But he also saw their humanity shine through. They mourned their dead. They celebrated victories with allies. They showed mercy to defeated entities when possible. They were warriors, yes, but they were also diplomats, scientists, teachers, friends. The final battle took place at the rift itself, a combined fleet of human and alien ships, working together with tactics humans had developed and trained others to use, sealed the rift permanently. The entities were cut off from whatever realm they had come from, and the survivors retreated into deep space, no longer a threat. The galaxy had won its first war in 3,000 years, and it had done so by learning from humanity. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council convened again. This time, the atmosphere was different. There was still caution, still concern about human potential, but there was also gratitude and respect. The Eternal Voice addressed the assembly. The Council acknowledges the debt we owe to humanity. You came to our aid when we faced extinction. You taught us how to defend ourselves. You proved that strength need not be feared if it is guided by honor. Ambassador Lu stood to respond. She looked older now, worn by months of coordinating war efforts. But she stood tall, proud of what her species had accomplished. We did not want this war, Lu said. We would have preferred to remain the peaceful newcomers, learning from more advanced species. But when the galaxy needed defenders, we became what we had to be. That is what humans do. We adapt. We survive. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is in our DNA, as Dr. Kelvin discovered, but it is also in our hearts, in our culture, in our choice. The Xanathi counselor who had called humans a threat months ago stood. I was wrong to fear humanity. I see that now. Your genetic potential is formidable, but your character is even more impressive. The galaxy is better for having you among us. Other counselors echoed similar sentiments. Even those who had been most cautious about humanity now recognized what they represented. Not a threat, but a safeguard. A species capable of standing guard while others pursued peace. Kelvin was invited to present his final research findings. He had months of combat data now, complete documentation of human genetic enhancement under maximum stress. The Supersoldier formula was no longer theoretical. He had seen it in action. My initial report was correct, Kelvin told the council. Humans possess unprecedented genetic enhancement capabilities. Under extreme stress, they can transform into warriors of remarkable ability. However, my initial report was also incomplete. I documented the mechanism, but not the purpose. I saw the weapon, but not the reason. He displayed images from the war. Humans fighting, yes, but also humans helping wounded aliens. Humans training other species. Humans mourning losses alongside their new friends. The Supersoldier formula in human DNA was not designed to create conquerors, Kelvin continued. It was designed to create survivors. And surviving, for humans, includes protecting others. Their enhancements make them capable warriors, but their culture and choice make them honorable ones. The formula is not something to fear. It is something to be grateful for. Because when the galaxy needed heroes, humanity was ready. The presentation concluded to respectful silence, then to applause. Species that could not clap found their own ways to show approval. Color changes, bioluminescence patterns, harmonic tones. After the session, Kelvin found himself approached by Dr. Sato, who had also been invited to present human perspectives on the research. You have changed your mind about us, Dr. Sato observed with a slight smile. I have refined my understanding, Kelvin replied. The data did not change. My interpretation of it did. Fear can blind us to truth. I am a scientist. I should have known better. You were cautious and thorough, which is exactly what a good scientist should be. You presented facts and let the evidence speak. That we proved ourselves through action rather than words, that is on us, not you. Kelvin considered that. Perhaps, but I wonder what would have happened if the Rift crisis had never occurred. Would the galaxy have eventually accepted humanity, or would fear have driven us apart? I think we would have found our way, Dr. Sato said. It might have taken longer, but humans are patient when we need to be. We would have proven ourselves eventually, in small ways if not large ones. The crisis simply accelerated the process. She was probably right. Humans had shown their character not just in combat, but in every interaction with alien species. They had been consistently friendly, helpful, curious. The super soldier potential was real, but it was not all they were. As Kelvin prepared to return to his station and his normal research, he reflected on what the last year had taught him. The galaxy was more fragile than he had realized, peace more precious because it was not permanent. And humanity, despite being newcomers, despite carrying the genetic legacy of a violent past, had chosen to be guardians of that peace. The super soldier formula hidden in human DNA no longer terrified Kelvin. Instead, it gave him hope. Because if humans could transform from violent apes to noble defenders through nothing but choice and will, perhaps there was hope for any species, any being, to rise above their nature and become something better. The galaxy had gained more than warriors when humans joined the Council. It had gained a reminder that who you choose to be matters more than what you were made to be. 3 years after the Rift crisis ended, Kelvin published his comprehensive study on human genetics and enhancement potential. It became required reading for every xenobiologist in the galaxy, a masterwork of scientific research and cultural observation. But the final chapter was not about genes or evolutionary pressures. It was about choice. Humanity has shown us that biological potential is not destiny, Kelvin wrote. They carry within their cells the capacity for violence and war, crafted by millions of years of survival on a harsh world. Yet they chose peace. When forced to fight, they fought with honor. When given the choice to dominate, they chose to protect. This is not a contradiction. This is the essence of sentience, the ability to choose who you will be despite what you are. The study earned Kelvin the Galactic Prize for Scientific Achievement, but he considered his true reward to be something else, the friendships he had formed with humans during his research. Sarah Chen still sent him Earth tea. James O'Brien had invited him to visit Earth someday. Dr. Sato collaborated with him on follow-up studies about adaptation and evolution. Humanity continued to integrate into galactic society. They brought their energy, their creativity, their determination. Some humans joined the military, forming the core of new defense forces that the galaxy maintained as insurance against future threats. Others pursued peaceful endeavors: art, science, exploration, trade. The enhancement sequences remained in their DNA, dormant most of the time, but ready to activate when needed. It was part of who they were, part of their legacy, but it did not define them. They defined themselves through their actions, their choices, their commitment to something greater than mere survival. Commander Torres retired from active service and became an instructor, teaching alien officers human combat tactics and strategy. But more importantly, she taught them human values: honor, sacrifice, duty tempered with mercy. Under her guidance, a new generation of defenders, human and alien alike, learned that strength without character was meaningless. Ambassador Liu rose through the diplomatic ranks, eventually becoming Earth's chief representative to the Council. She advocated tirelessly for cooperation and understanding between species, building bridges that grew stronger with each year. When she spoke of the lessons humanity had learned from their violent past, other species listened with respect rather than fear. The galaxy changed, slowly but steadily. The 3,000 years of peace had made species complacent, confident that civilization had evolved beyond conflict. The Rift crisis shattered that confidence. But humanity taught them that acknowledging the possibility of conflict did not mean abandoning peace. It meant being prepared to defend it. Kelvin watched these changes with satisfaction. His research had contributed to understanding, had helped the galaxy see humanity clearly rather than through the distorted lens of fear. But the humans themselves had done the real work, living their truth day by day, proving through action that genetic potential was only one factor in determining a species' character. On the 5th anniversary of first contact between humans and the Galactic Council, A ceremony was held on Earth. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered in the newly constructed United Galactic Embassy in Geneva, Switzerland. It was a symbol of integration, of humanity's full acceptance into the galactic community. Kelvin attended as an honored guest. Standing in that building filled with beings from across the galaxy, all coexisting peacefully on the human homeworld, he felt profound emotion. This had seemed impossible just 5 years ago. The gulf between violent humanity and peaceful aliens had seemed unbridgeable. But bridges had been built. Understanding had been achieved. Not despite humanity's nature, but because they had been honest about it and shown that nature could be transcended. During the ceremony, a young human child approached Kelvin. She could not have been more than 10 years old, with bright eyes full of curiosity. She carried a flower, one of Earth's roses, and offered it to him. "My teacher said you are the scientist who studied humans," the child said. "She said you were scared of us at first, but then you understood us. Is that true?" Kelvin accepted the flower carefully, his scaled fingers gentle. "Yes, that is true. I was scared because I did not understand, but your people taught me that fear comes from ignorance." "Are you still scared of us?" the child asked innocently. Kelvin looked around the embassy at the gathered species, at the humans mingling easily with aliens, at the genuine friendships and partnerships that had formed. He thought about everything he had learned, everything humanity had shown the galaxy. "No," he said honestly, "I am not scared, I am grateful." The child smiled and ran back to her parents, satisfied with the answer. Kelvin watched her go, this small human carrying in her DNA the same supersoldier potential as every other human. But she was just a child, innocent and kind, shaped by a culture that chose peace. That was the real discovery, the one that mattered more than any genetic sequence. Humanity had learned to raise their children for peace while maintaining the capacity for war. They had achieved the balance that ensured peace, not through weakness, but through prepared strength tempered by wisdom. As the ceremony concluded and the gathered beings celebrated this milestone in galactic history, Kelvin made a personal recording, a note to himself and to future scientists who might study the complex relationship between nature and choice. "I began this research seeking to understand a threat," he recorded. "I ended understanding a truth, that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are not those with the capacity for violence, but those with the capacity for violence who choose honor instead." Humanity carries the supersoldier formula in their DNA, and they always will. This is unchangeable, a fundamental part of their biology. But what they do with that capacity, how they choose to express it or suppress it, that is entirely within their control. And they have chosen to be defenders, not conquerors, protectors, not predators. That choice, repeated every day by billions of humans, is more impressive than any genetic sequence. It is the choice that gives me hope, not just for humanity, but for all of us. If they can rise above their violent nature, perhaps we all can rise above our limitations, whatever they might be. Kelvin ended the recording and rejoined the celebration. An alien scientist among humans and aliens alike, all of them building something new together. A galaxy where strength and peace could coexist, where the supersoldier formula hidden in human DNA was not a source of terror, but a source of security. A reminder that when darkness threatened, there would be those ready to stand against it. And in the end, that was what humanity had given the galaxy. Not fear, but hope. The hope that sentience meant choice, that biology was not destiny, that peace could be defended by those strong enough to fight, but wise enough to choose mercy. The supersoldier formula remained in human DNA, a silent legacy of Earth's harsh evolutionary path. But it was balanced now by something equally powerful: the human commitment to being something more than mere survivors, to being the best versions of themselves, even when it would be easier to give in to their nature. The galaxy had learned from humanity, and humanity had learned from the galaxy. Together, they built a future where both could thrive, where the lessons of the past informed the present without constraining it, where every species contributed their unique strengths to the whole. Kelvin smiled as he watched humans and aliens dancing together to music that blended instruments from a dozen worlds. The research that had begun in fear had ended in understanding. The genetic formula that had terrified every alien scientist had become a source of comfort, proof that when the galaxy needed heroes, they would be ready. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that heroes were not born from gentle worlds or peaceful evolution. Heroes were forged in hardship, tempered by choice, and defined by their willingness to stand between the innocent and harm, regardless of the cost to themselves. Humanity had been forged in the fires of Earth's brutal history. They carried the scars of that forging in every cell. But those scars had made them strong enough to protect others, wise enough to choose when to fight and when to show mercy, brave enough to face down extinction for the sake of beings they barely knew. The Supersoldier formula was real. The potential was undeniable. But what mattered, what truly mattered, was that humanity had proven the formula was not a weapon of conquest, but a shield for the innocent. And that made all the difference.